Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sue Shawmans, and wherever you are in the world, welcome to my channel. I hope you're well. Today I'm going to be covering part 3 of my book, Sink Then Swim: How to Survive Life's Most Stressful Situations When Living Abroad. Part 3 is by far the biggest part of the book. It is full of stories. Stories of 7 people that I interviewed to share their stories of living abroad and dealing with life's most stressful situations. If you do an internet search of life's most stressful situations, you will come up with moving home, death of a family member, divorce, separation, ill health, and finding work, being out of work, amongst others. And those are the chapters within this particular part of the book, part 3. And the first chapter covers life abroad. So the moving home and the settling in and getting to grips with the new ways of doing things, the practical things of living in a new country. So this is not just about moving home, this is actually about moving home and moving country. In their stories, they share how situations that they came across made them sink, and situations that they came across that they got swimming. They also shared how they got leggy with their thoughts and emotions. Getting leggy is something that I shared in part 1. And they also shared the importance of pulling on their own values and strengths to enable them to get swimming again and to get through these situations. So in this chapter, you will learn how to deal with both the similarities and the differences between your home and your host country. You will also learn and appreciate or begin to understand the importance of using your values and your strengths to get through this. Let me share a couple of things with you. First, a bit of a quote here, or quote from my book, not a bit of a quote, but an actual quote. When you decided to live abroad, you signed up for concentrated, accelerated, and extensive change. You maybe didn't know that, but that's what you were going to get. You didn't expect everything in your host country to be the same as your home country, did you? You knew you would come face to face with difference. That's exactly what it's like when you move abroad. So in terms of learnings that you take from this chapter, the importance of researching the country that you intend to move to. Not only the economy, but also the educational requirements, because that may create issues for you with regard to the kind of work that you do. Also the importance of becoming a tourist, to learn about your new home country, the history, etc., the ways of doing things. So that's the first chapter in part 3. What it meant to me is what happened as I was interviewing the individuals was I realised that some of the things that they were talking about I'd gone through myself, and it made me aware of the values and the strengths that I'd also pulled on to get through these situations. So there are some things that are common to all of us that we experience when we're moving from our home country to a new country abroad, a host country as we call it, whether that be language or connecting with people. But there's so much more. There's so much more learning from that chapter. The next chapter in part 3 is titled Death of a Relative Preparing for the Worst. The reality is when we live abroad, there is a high probability that at some point we could lose a family member, because death in life is a given. We're not here forever. But dealing with those circumstances is far from easy. Here's one quote from my book. Living thousands of kilometres away makes things complicated. Taking care of the deceased affairs and attending to the funeral is difficult. It really is, from personal experience. It's just not easy at all. In this chapter, both Anna and Pauline share their stories. Anna talks about her cousin who was diagnosed with cancer. She referred to her cousin, who's called Abigail, as her big sister. They'd lived together from a young age, so they were very close. Abigail died of cancer and Anna had to say goodbye to her over the phone. She was devastated. Something that quite a number of us living abroad may have to do or have done at some point. Then Pauline shares her story of how both her mum and dad became ill and how she spoke to her employer and literally moved the whole family to her homeland so she could care for her mum and dad. Her dad died first, and then just 9 months later, her mum died when she'd actually returned back to her host country, and that was more of a sudden, alarming death that she'd not expected really at all. So both Anna and Pauline share their stories, they share their learnings, they talked about the importance of managing your health, or expressing how you're feeling with other people that you can trust. They also talked about the importance of speaking with your relatives about funeral wishes. For example, do they want to be buried? Do they want to be cremated? What kind of flowers do they want? What's their favourite colour for the flowers? And they also then stress the importance of writing your own will. What are your wishes for when you pass? All these are really important lessons and learnings that we can take away from this chapter. But one of the hardest things that most people find is actually to sit down and to talk to family members about their wishes, because some people just don't want to talk about it. And in that situation, it's important that you, in some shape or form, get information from your family members. So that's the next chapter in part 3, Death of a Relative, Preparing for the Worst. The next chapter in part 3 is titled Divorce and Separation. Storms don't last forever. But boy, these storms can be pretty rough when you're in them. Here's a quote from this part of the book. Whether it's your decision to divorce or separation or your partner's, the foundation in which your life abroad exists is shaken to the core. There is absolutely no doubt about that. In this chapter, I share the stories of Nicole and Laura. Nicole moved from Canada to Belgium to be with her new partner. Within a short space of time, she got married. And within another short space of time, she realised something was not right. She filed for divorce. She went through 3 solicitors, one after the other, just didn't work out for her. A very distressing story, one that thankfully Nicole got through. Then I move on to Laura. Laura moved from Croatia with her son to Norway. Her son was also the son of her partner. They weren't married, but they decided, oh yeah, it's time that we got together as a family unit. So she moved to Norway. Within a very short period of time, an argument broke out between her and her partner. He called the police. The police instructed that their son then went to his parents for the night while the atmosphere calmed down. And then Laura found herself fighting with what she referred to as a monster child protection service. She was fighting for the custody of her son for a year. Also a very distressing story. Both Nicole and Laura share their learnings from their situations. Understand how you will cope financially without your partner if you're facing separation or divorce, and whether you've got the right to stay in the country, and if you've got children, what happens in those situations. Also, the importance of reaching out to friends and allowing them to support you along the way, because in these situations, most of the time you can't do it all alone. But yet, you are potentially alone in that situation. So quite a few learnings and takeaways from this chapter, of things for you to think about. Have you thought about the consequences of what would happen if you're divorcing or separated from your partner when you're living abroad? And what about the kids? What this chapter meant for me, what it brought to the fore for me, is it kind of brought up old wounds from childhood. Was being introduced to a third father figure by the time I was 13. So the impact of children on a divorce situation should not be underestimated, and it's really important to protect them and care for them along the way and give them emotional support. Now, this is a bit of an aside to what's been addressed already, but in my relationship, I couldn't find work in Norway, so I decided I was going to go back to the UK. What that meant was that I was separated from my husband for a good year, and we were commuting to see one another. That put a massive strain on a relationship. So think about that, not only in terms of divorce, separation, but if you're looking to find work, what will happen if you can't find it? And the other point to think about is, where would I live if our relationship broke down? Would I stay in my in my host country? Would I return to my home country? So there's lots of learning to be taken from this particular chapter, titled Divorce and Separation. Storms don't last forever. The next chapter in part 3 is titled Ill Health, Dealing with the Unthinkable. Ill health sadly affects many of us, and when you're living abroad, it can be pretty challenging, to say the least. Here's a quote from this chapter. The news that you or a relative are ill is undoubtedly unwelcome and distressing. You're dealing with the unthinkable, living a nightmare. Here in this chapter, both Matilda and I share our stories of ill health. To Matilda, nothing was more important than family. So when her mum called her and informed her that the cancer had returned for the second time, all Matilda was thinking about was, I need to be home with my mum. She'd recently started a new job, but she plucked up the courage and spoke to her employer, her manager, and said, I just need to be with my mum. I can't focus on my work right now. Thankfully, her leave was approved and she was able to work from home, from her home country, while she was supporting her mum, caring for her mum, and taking her to treatment appointment. And that was no easy task for Matilda, being new to a job, but also her mum lived in Italy. She was working from the UK and from Africa, and her partner was living in Belgium, but she managed it. I then share my story of when I was diagnosed with cancer for the second time in January 2022. This was metastasized breast cancer. So I opened Pandora's box, as it's called, and I started to look at what the real cause of the cancer could be. And I went on a journey of releasing suppressed emotions from childhood. And here are some of the takeaways, some of the learnings that we shared with regard to our stories. It's important to look at health holistically, not only physically, but emotional and our psychological health. And the other thing is, where possible and where it's needed, to speak to your employer, to ask for some time off, special leave, or ask if you can work away from the office for a period of time. So be open and honest with your employer. Lots more learnings in that chapter that we share. What it meant for me, the big headline is that our health is much more complex than our physical health. There is our emotional and our psychological health involved here. And the other thing that really came out of it was that life is so important, and we should be doing in life what is really important to us. So that's the next chapter in part 3, titled Ill Health, Dealing with the unthinkable. The final chapter in part 3 is titled Finding a Job in Turbulent Waters. Finding work when you live abroad is by far no easy task. Let me share with you a quote from this chapter. Finding a job when you live abroad can at best be confusing and at worst destabilising. You want to work. You need to work. In this chapter, I share both Evgeny and Hortense's stories. Evgeny lived in Russia and he always dreamed of working in Europe. When the war broke out between Russia and Ukraine, he fled to Turkey. And from Turkey, he spent a whole year trying to find work in Europe. He was successful, but he said, you know, Sue, finding a job is a job in itself. It was really hard work. And at the same time, he had a family to support with no income. So it was really destabilizing for him. But he did get there in the end. Hortense moved from the US to Norway. She was being given temporary contracts, and with temporary contracts came temporary visas. It was just so unsettling. And not only that, she was doing jobs that really didn't fulfill her skills and her ability. It took 20 years before she was headhunted. Shocking. But these stories are reality when you're looking to work abroad. Sometimes you can get lucky and it works out, absolutely, there is no doubt about it. These stories share the difficulties that you can come across when you move abroad and you have no job to go to. So the takeaways and the learnings that are shared by Evgeny and Hortense are many, and here are just a few of them. Appreciate that it will likely take you longer to secure employment in your host country than it would have done in your home country. Share your experiences with friends. Doing so may actually provide some insights into why your applications aren't being successful. Maybe they've been through the same situation and they've got some hints or tips. And another big tip is actually to continue to work with your existing employer in your home country or previous host country where possible, because that gives you a bridging period while you're finding work in your new host country. So there's a few tips. There are more within that chapter. So questions for you are, have you actually thought about how you will find work when you're living abroad? And who will be able to help you secure employment? Because you need that assistance from others. What this chapter meant for me, because I have also had issues finding work abroad, is that securing employment before you relocate is quite wise. My husband, when he first relocated to Norway, secured a job before he left, and that was one of the criteria. He said, I am not relocating without a job to go to. Be open to the fact that finding work may lead you in a different direction, a different career. And develop the skills, the strengths, the competencies of being flexible and also patient. So that's the last chapter in part 3. Hope you've enjoyed it. Please like, comment, share and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next one, which will be part 4 of my book, Sink Then Swim, How to Survive Life's Most Stressful Situations When Living Abroad. See you in the next one. Bye for now.